I spent 40 years putting a number on what people lose. Fire, flood, theft, the slow damp rot that eats a house from the inside out. My job was to walk into the wreckage of somebody's life, take out a notepad, and tell them, as gently as an insurance form allows, what it had all been worth. I retired at 65 with a decent pension and a private conviction that most of what actually matters cannot be assessed on a claims form. I did not expect an auction house preview evening to be the place I finally understood why. The Children's Hospice does an evening at Hartwell and Vane every spring, a private preview 2 nights before the big charity sale, canapes and Prosecco threaded between the lots, the whole grand sale room lit gold under its skylights so the patrons can walk the aisles before the gavel falls. I've gone 11 years running, ever since my late wife sat on the hospice's board, and I go still, though she's been gone 4 years now, because the money buys equipment for children who need it, and because, if I am honest, I like walking among things that used to belong to someone. It is a strange room to spend an evening in, if you think about it too hard. Every lot carries a small printed card, giving its provenance in the driest possible terms. A clock, from a Berkshire estate, a set of silver, the property of a gentleman, and none of the cards say the only thing that would actually interest you, which is who sat beside the clock waiting for bad news, or who polished that silver every Christmas for 40 years, before it ended up priced by weight and craftsmanship, and nothing else. I have never quite got used to it. That evening the room was fuller than usual, the hospice having sold rather more tickets than the fire regulations strictly allowed, and the noise of 60 conversations under a glass roof has a particular pressure to it, like weather building before it breaks. That is where I first properly noticed Alistair Kemp, though I'd nodded to him at a dozen of these evenings without ever learning his name. He was the house's removal man, the one who wheeled the crates in from the vans, who unbolted the packing cases, who stood at the edges of the room in a plain gray coat, while everyone else circulated in dinner jackets. 50-odd, quiet, careful hands. That evening he was standing beside Lot 42, a gleaming Bosendorfer Grand that had come in from some downsizing estate out past Henley, and he was polishing a smear of dust from its lacquer with a soft cloth, slowly, the way you'd towel down something that mattered, rather than something you were paid to shine. "You've a fondness for that one," I said, mostly to be pleasant. "It's a good instrument," he said, and didn't look up. I might have left it there, except that Rupert Calendar, the house's senior auctioneer, chose that moment to sweep past with a cluster of bidders in tow, the sort of man who has spent 30 years turning a gavel into a kind of theater, and who has never in his life missed an opportunity for an audience. He caught sight of Alistair's cloth still moving over the piano's flank, and stopped, delighted, the way a man stops when he's found his next line. "Ah, Kemp." He said it to the piano as much as to Alistair, raising his voice so the little circle of bidders would catch it too. "Since you've hauled enough of these things in and out of vans over the years, why don't you give us a little demonstration? Go on. Something simple, nothing you'd need training for, might even help move the lot." He smiled around at his audience, inviting them into the joke, and they obliged him, a ripple of soft, indulgent laughter, the kind that costs nothing and means less. A woman in green touched her husband's sleeve and murmured something. Somebody's champagne caught the light. I expected Alistair to do what I would have done, mutter something about getting back to the crates, and go. Instead, he folded the polishing cloth once, twice, set it down flat on the piano's closed lid, and looked at Calendar for a moment longer than was comfortable. "All right," he said. Calendar's smile didn't change, but something behind it flickered, as though the joke had answered back in a way he hadn't planned for. The little crowd, sensing something, drifted closer instead of moving on, the way people do at auctions when they think there might, after all, be a show. A man near me murmured, not unkindly, "Didn't know the removal men came with a party piece," and his wife shushed him, more out of good manners than any real belief that a party piece was about to arrive. Alistair opened the lid himself, unhurried, and sat. I noticed, because 40 years of walking through other people's ruined houses teaches you to notice small physical things, that he adjusted the bench with a single precise motion, no fumbling, the motion of a man who has done it 10,000 times before, not once. He rested his hands in his lap for a second, not the theatrical pause of somebody buying time, but something quieter, almost private, the way you'd pause outside a door before deciding to go in. Then he reached forward and, very lightly, pressed down on the fallboard's inside edge with one thumb, feeling for something. There is a particular hinge click a well-worn piano lid makes, and I watched his face when he heard it, a small, involuntary softening, the kind of look a man gets when a stranger's voice turns out, after all, to be someone he knows. "That pedal always stuck a half-inch further than it should," he said, quietly, to no one in particular, and pressed the unaccorda once, testing. Calendar, still performing for his bidders, laughed again, lighter this time, uncertain now whether he was still the one telling the joke. "Go on then," he said, "something simple." Alistair's hands settled over the keys. What came out of that piano was not simple, and it was not, I understood within 4 bars, anything he had learned that week to make a fool of Rupert Calendar. It was Scriabin, the little etude in C-sharp minor, the one that opens like a held breath and then does not so much build as widen, each phrase folding back over the last with a kind of grief that has learned, over long practice, how to be beautiful instead of merely sad. I am not a musical man. I have sat through 40 years of school concerts and christenings and the occasional wedding organist, and none of it prepared me for what it does to a room when someone plays a thing they have carried, silently, for a very long time. The laughter didn't stop all at once. It thinned, the way conversation thins in a restaurant when a fire alarm goes off 2 streets away, people not quite believing yet that it concerns them. Then the woman in green stopped murmuring to her husband. Then Calendar's own smile, which had been doing a great deal of work all evening, simply ran out of places to go and settled, slack, into something closer to attention. By the 8th or 9th bar, nobody in that sale room was talking at all. I watched Alistair's hands, because I could not look away from them. There is a particular economy to real playing. No flourish, no performance of feeling for the sake of an audience, only the exact pressure a phrase requires, and not 1 ounce more. And his hands had it entirely. His shoulders were low, his eyes were mostly closed. When the melody rose into its long central climb, chord stacking on chord the way water rises before it finally goes over a weir, I felt something in my own chest tighten that had nothing to do with the music itself, and everything to do with watching a man arrive, in front of 60 strangers, at a room inside himself he plainly had not opened in a long time. Near the end, there is a passage. I didn't know its name then. I looked it up afterward, out of a need to be able to put a word to what had happened to me, where the melody drops away almost to nothing, and the left hand alone carries the piece home, tolling, unhurried, final. There was a moment, just before that, where his right hand seemed almost to hesitate over a chord, the way you'd hesitate over a name you hadn't said aloud in years, and then it came down anyway, full weight, as if the hesitation itself had been part of the piece all along. Alistair played the closing bars with his head bowed slightly toward the keys, and in the hush of that sale room, under the gold skylights, with 60 well-dressed strangers standing absolutely still around him, I understood that I was not watching a demonstration. I was watching a man say something to an instrument that he had clearly been unable to say to anyone else for a very long time. The last chord did not so much end as dissolve, his hands lifting from the keys the way you'd lift your hand from someone's shoulder once you were sure they didn't need holding up any longer. Nobody clapped. For 3, 4, 5 long seconds, nobody in that room made a sound at all, and I have stood in burned-out kitchens and flooded sitting rooms across 4 decades, and never once felt a silence with that particular weight in it. Not empty, but full, the way a held breath is full. Then the room rose, not politely, not in the scattered way people rise for a competent recital, all at once, the way you get to your feet without deciding to, because your body has understood something, before your manners have caught up. The applause, when it came, went on considerably longer than any auction house preview evening requires. I looked for Rupert Calendar in the middle of it, and found him near the piano, not applauding at all. He had gone the particular gray of a man whose best line has just been handed back to him with interest. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I watched him walk the 2 steps to lot 42, reach past Alistair's shoulder, and quietly unclip the little printed catalog card, lot 42, from its stand on the fallboard, and put it in his jacket pocket, the way you'd pocket something you had suddenly decided was not, after all, for sale. It was the house's junior cataloger, a young woman named Priya, who told me the rest an hour later, over the coffee they'd laid on once the room had settled. Alistair's father had run a small piano tuning and restoration business in the same county 40 years before, until a bad year and a worse bank had taken the business, the house, and eventually the piano his mother had played every evening after supper. It had gone through an estate sale itself back then, and nobody in the family had known where it went, or that it would take 3 further owners and 31 years to arrive, entirely by accident, at the loading bay of the very auction house where the son now worked, hauling other people's forgotten possessions in and out of vans for a wage. He'd recognized the hinge click within a week of it coming into the warehouse, Priya said. He hadn't told anyone. He'd simply asked, quietly, to be the one who cataloged it, polished it, wheeled it out for the preview evening, hoping, I suppose, for nothing more than an evening standing near it before it went to whoever bid highest, and took it away again, this time for good. She said he'd come in early most mornings that fortnight, before the rest of the staff arrived, and she'd assumed at first it was simply thoroughness, an old crate to unpack, a delivery to log, until she noticed the same lot number appearing in his handwriting on the worksheet every single day, long after the cataloging itself was finished. Calendar withdrew Lot 42 from the sale that same week. There was no announcement, no press release, nothing that would have suited a showman who had built 30 years of career on exactly that kind of gesture. The catalog for the spring sale simply came out with 41 lots instead of 42, and a small blank space where the description of a Bosendorfer grand piano used to be. I understand from Priya that it was delivered to a modest terraced house 2 streets from the auction house the following month, and that nobody from Hartwell and Vane ever spoke of the matter again in public. I have thought about that evening more than almost any other in my retirement, and I have come, slowly, to a conclusion I would not have reached in my working years. I spent 4 decades assigning a fair market value to the things people lost, the burned piano stools, the flooded photograph albums, the water-damaged violin cases, and I was, by all professional measures, quite good at it. But I never once, in all that time, had the instrument itself to put a number on. I had only ever assessed what was left after the thing that mattered was already gone. I think often, too, of Calendar's face in that first long silence. Not shame exactly, and not quite humility either, but the particular stillness of a man recalculating, in real time, everything he had assumed he understood about the people who worked in his own building. He never apologized to Alistair, not in my hearing, and I don't believe Alistair would have wanted him to. There are debts that a spoken apology only cheapens, and Calendar seemed, in the end, to understand that much, that the honest thing was simply to take the card out of his pocket, close the catalog at 41 lots, and let the piano go home. That night, for the only time in 40 years of valuing loss, I watched the thing come back.